David Brewster here, new episode of 3 for All. This is 3 Harvey Mandel Licks from 1971, and I've had some requests to feature some of Harvey's music. Definitely an overlooked guitar pioneer and legend. Very essential and important guitarist, even though most people have no idea who he is. And Harvey's career actually started in 1966. He cut an album with Charlie Musselwhite. Eventually in 1969 he joined forces with Canned Heat, and his third gig with Canned Heat was at Woodstock. So could you imagine playing your third gig with a band for 400,000 people? I mean, that's insane. And then he continued, eventually started working with John Mayall and became a solo artist and very prolific. I think he's released like 21 solo albums, a bunch of live albums and compilations. Definitely, Harvey Mandel is a legendary guitarist. For those that are new to Harvey's name and his music, here's an image with some of the groups and musicians that Harvey worked with in his career. Keep in mind, he did temporarily play with the Stones, like around 1976. He didn't last very long. He definitely jumped right back into his solo career. But he's worked with an assortment of, rock and blues rock legends. Aside from the artists and groups that Harvey's worked with in his career, also performing at Woodstock with Canned Heat, he's definitely a pioneer of tapping. Definitely an early tapper on the guitar, alongside other players like Steve Hackett and Dickie Betts and Billy Gibbons and players like that. And Harvey definitely had a hand, pun intended, in pioneering and developing tapping techniques. So here's a bonus lick before we even get started. Here's a clip from 1999 showing Harvey doing this kind of bent tapping. Think Panama by Van Halen, but check this out. So that lick's something like this. He's grabbing C to D, bends that D to E, and then he starts this bent tapping, approach where he's bending this up a whole step. He's tapping G right there on the 12th fret, but with that bend, that's going to sound like an A. And he's also grabbing this F right there, but with that bend held, it's going to sound like a G. So he's doing this kind of like fake release with the bend like this. Something like that. C to D, bend that D to E, and then you're going to tap that G right there. And you hear him kind of release the bend, and he brings it back up, and then he taps that F. Then he exaggerates that bend and release and does it again. And then a really lazy release on that D note too. The licks in this episode, minus the tapping lick right there, but the licks in this episode actually came from a TV appearance in 1971. I think it was the Rockaplast TV show, and he was playing with John Mayall in 1971. And the video footage is really interesting. There's a whole bunch going on. They've superimposed, musicians and that early 70s kind of TV special look. But anyway, there's some cool licks. Go ahead and kick on your phaser, because these first few ideas have tons of phase. But here we go. The first lick's the sneaky blues phrase, and once I kind of reveal this idea, you'll see what's sneaky about it once it unfolds. But it's something like this. One more time. So we're in A flat right there. And at first I thought Harvey was tuned down a half step, then I realized no, 1971, and I watched the footage closer, and he's just playing in A flat right there. So think A flat minor pentatonic like the box, and he's grabbing this D flat, bending that to E flat with some vibrato. Come down the box, and then that next phrase right there. So one more time, kind of slow. And then the next phrase is where it gets sneaky. So one more time with that first phrase. Right here, interesting. You know, it's the minor to major third to the fourth. And then this is all index finger. And your index finger is just kind of hopping around there from the G to the B to the G to the high E back to the G. And kind of a slight smear bend on that last note there. What an interesting phrase. Tons of phaser, you know, throwing around here too. I couldn't really identify what guitar, you know, Harvey was playing in this clip. That's also a really funky guitar. But one more time with this lick. The next lick's the same song in the same key, but it's this rolling bluesy legato idea, like this. One more time. Really unusual phrase here too, but he's, you know, still an A flat minor pentatonic box right there, starting on this G flat, and then he really just comes down D flat to that B note to that A flat, and then after that initial, you know, kind of move, that's where he starts doing this sneaky legato, like that. And he's doing, you know, the fourth to the major third to the minor third, so he's kind of rolling backwards. It's this really interesting, you know, sound. Last time just comes straight down. Then he does this really gradual bend on that D flat. And ends like that. So one more time, kind of slow. And then one more time at tempo. The next idea is using the dominant pentatonic scale. I'm definitely a big fan of dominant pentatonic usage, and I've featured that scale definitely in other episodes on the channel here. We're still in A flat, and it's something like this. One more time. And it's kind of getting lost in that syrupy swirl, you know, from the phaser, but it's still kind of hiding in there. So think A flat dominant pentatonic. And I guess more accurately would be this little, you know, fragment of that scale. Right? Because that's kind of what he's playing with. Like that. And then... So he's really playing with that major third and using a bend when he plays it. There he's basically using that bend on the fourth. Right? And then... And I love that kind of, you know, sour bend on the third. You know, really cool stuff. And it comes right out of that dominant pentatonic, you know, scale. Okay, here's a bonus lick, and I know I already added a bonus lick at the beginning with that tapped phrase, but here's a bonus lick, I guess. And this isn't from the John Mayall footage from '71. This is actually Harvey playing in San Francisco in 1995. And he whips out this really cool hybrid picked kind of legato phrase, like this. One more time. I'm a sucker for hybrid picking for sure. So this is going to be more or less an F minor, right? So different key, and he's basically relying on this, you know, position of F minor pentatonic right here. And that's where that hybrid picked pull-off comes from, because he's basically grabbing this. So the hybrid picking's on the G, and I'm just using my pick on the D right there. So you're pulling off this A flat back to that F note and then grabbing that C right there. And you're going to do that 16 times. So if you want help like counting that, just count to 4 times. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Like that. And after that, after 16 times of that pull off, you're going to do just kind of like an F blues lick right there. Or F minor pentatonic, I guess, not F blues. But it's a bluesy lick in F, I guess is what I meant. But anyway, all the way together kind of slower. And then at tempo. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of 3 for All with this look at 3 Harvey Mandel Licks from 1971. Definitely a pioneer, legendary guitarist that's painfully overlooked. And I've talked to students and friends and just random strangers about various bands and guitarists. And anytime Harvey's name comes up, it seems like people are confused. They mention Canned Heat or maybe some of his solo albums like The Snake on the Wall up there. And there's holes, like in people's, most people's understanding of who Harvey Mandel is or was. And once you start kind of, filling in those holes and you realize like the steps and the things that he did, things that he pioneered and people that he influenced. And although I've never really noticed like Van Halen talking about Harvey, I do suspect that he was an influence right along with everybody else that, Van Halen was listening to. But Harvey was tapping and experimenting with tapping long before people knew who Van Halen was. And I always kind of pay attention to those players, Alan Halsworth and, Robin Trower and players like that, Tommy Bolin and players like that. But then with Harvey Mandel, definitely he's still active, he's still with us, and his legacy is definitely, misunderstood, it seems, even though he's a very important guitarist and pioneer of a lot of techniques that you hear in the modern world. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Laying Out Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.